Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you this morning. We all made it to Sunday. Congratulations. It is not always easy to make it through a week and still remember how important it is to center ourselves one way or another. But today, here in the sanctuary and online, I'm so glad we're together. In this place, where we continue learning not just how to live our values, but also how to support each other to practice living them in whatever way each of us is called today, including to start with love toward ourselves and toward other people, here and anywhere in our lives. I'm the Reverend Ellen Quaadgras, in co-leadership here at South Church with Kirsten Hunter, our Director of Lifespan Ministry, and in shared ministry with all of you. Today, with the summer theme of creativity, we focus on sharing around two of our values in particular, justice and equity. Sharing stories about our continued striving as a movement to dismantle systems of oppression, particularly those targeting people of color, lifting up the challenges, insights, and blessings each of us may find along that path. Chris George will be our worship associate today. First time, so excited for you. And Mel Blake, BJ Lates, and Dick Lates will all be offering personal offerings, stories on this topic. Many, many thanks to you. Please take a look at your order of service to see all the other magical, wonderful people who are involved in making this service happen today. I am grateful to every one of them. After our time for all ages, the children will be invited to join Stacy outside for their religious explorations. If you have not yet signed your young person up, please do that before you set them free. After the service, all are invited onto the portico for coffee and conversation. And here is your question of the day to ask someone, preferably that you barely know or don't know at all. What is a book, story, or poem by a person of color or about race and racism that has touched you, moved you, or opened your eyes to something you didn't understand before? So a book, poem, or story that touched you or moved you in particular around race and racism. Assistive listening devices and large print hymnals are available, and an usher can assist you if you would like one. Please silence your cell phone if you have one. And I will be offering our announcements from the pulpit today. First, there are many announcements in your order of service. There are wonderful things happening. Please take a look. I want to lift up just a couple. Beloved Conversations is a course focused on learning, growing, and talking about racism's impact on our dominant culture and on ourselves. This past spring, Mel, BJ, and Dick and I all participated in the version of the class designed for white people, trying to deepen our understanding. If you're interested in joining for the fall, or the possibility of joining, all of us are available to talk more about it after the service, so come and talk with one of us if you like. After the service, there will also be a postcard writing opportunity to get out the vote and help protect our democracy. We'll also be talking about other potential opportunities for engagement with the election this fall. So come on down, grab a few colored pens and write with us and think with us about that. And finally, you may have heard that our theme for September is invitation. And you may have heard a gentle nudge that this is a great time to invite that friend to church who you kind of think would find something here that they've been looking for. Or even to invite back someone who used to come but who you miss seeing. The theme for our service on September 8th will be Finding Your Way Back Home. It's kind of a perfect time to invite folks to come. And also, if you happen to be someone who was invited by a friend to come to church, I would love to hear your story. As we prepare to begin our service with the invocation, let us first take a moment to acknowledge the sacredness of the land on which this sanctuary stands, to express gratitude for the Pennacook and Abenaki people who cared for and stewarded this land long before our presence here, and to honor their enduring legacy and recognize their continued presence here. May we also reflect on our relationship with this land and with all people, especially those who have been historically marginalized and mistreated. Let this acknowledgement be a call to action and a commitment to learn and grow as we strive for justice in all that we do.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere.
As we light our chalice here, we invite people watching at home to light a candle or chalice of their own. We light this chalice today with these words from Deborah Falk. Symbolic of the warmth of community and the brightness that love brings to the world, illuminating our search for justice and peace. Light, that force that nurtures all living things, here in our midst in this flame, so tiny and so significant. Please rise in body or in spirit and join me in reciting the mission statement printed in your order of service. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people, and we inspire one another to act on our faith in the larger community. There weren't many conversations in my family growing up about race, but there were many lessons. The first lesson I remember was as a young boy. My dad had grown up in West Texas as the son of a sharecropper on land that was more desert than garden. They grew cotton and they plowed with mules. Our family drove down in a Ford station wagon in the early 50s from eastern Pennsylvania to visit his folks. I remember we drove through a town in the deep South, and they had signs on the bathrooms and the water fountains, distinguishing them as colored and white. It was also clear from the outside that the white facilities were in better repair than the colored. So much for separate but equal. And then on the same trip, outside of Sweetwater in a little town called Roby, Texas, I went with my Uncle Howard to purchase ammunition for a .22 caliber rifle that they owned. When we got to the counter to buy the bullets, the man who took Uncle Howard's money asked, "So what are you going to do with these? Shoot some people of color?" Except he didn't use the term people of color. Uncle Howard and I didn't laugh, but we also didn't voice how offensive that was. The year was somewhere around 1954. When I got home and was back to school, I remember we started the school day with reading a passage from the Bible and saying the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. When we recited the pledge, I remember thereafter going silent when the passage, "with liberty and justice for all," was spoken. I knew even at a young age that there was not liberty and justice for all. People of color faced discrimination and hatred, and there was no justice in the land if you were a person of color. Another lesson happened in college. I was a member of a fraternity who was hoping to get an African American student at the college to choose that fraternity. The man was bright and athletic and social and smart and a really good guy. Our fraternity had no people of color as members. And one evening during rush, the fraternity sent an alumni to our house, and he spoke about what a mistake it would be to accept this black person into our group. He used racist language, and he addressed the fraternity. And I stood there politely, letting him speak words that I knew were racist, and I said nothing. I've always regretted that. In retrospect, I wish I had screamed at him until the walls tumbled down. I wish I had demanded that he leave the house immediately. I wish I had drawn a line in the sand and said, "Choose your side." I was ashamed to have been in the same social group that this person was in. Instead, I simply walked away. I had nothing more to do with the group. And I've always regretted that I did not take that opportunity to confront racism at its most unabashed. There is a time to rise up for righteousness, and on that day, I missed that opportunity. I don't plan to let that happen again. And now, please rise in body or spirit to join together to sing hymn 1040.
Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, hush, somebody's calling my name. Hush, what shall I do?
All right. I'd like to invite any young people, young in age, young at heart, to come forward and join me here for our Time for All Ages story. All right. Come on up, find a seat, make yourself comfortable as you can on the carpet. Okay. So we heard a very moving share just now by Chris George, and it makes me think about what's my part? What can I do to fight racism? As Chris offered, we can maybe not just refuse to say words that falsely claim justice exists. We can not just refuse to join a group that discriminates, but we can vow to actively speak up when we encounter racism. Or you can, like our youth group did last year, go on a service trip to Alabama, where they volunteered at a community farm, picked up trash, and pulled out an invasive weed called nutgrass. They learned that getting rid of racism is kind of like pulling nutgrass. It's hard work because the roots are deep and not always visible, and the plant keeps growing back. While they were in Alabama, the Supreme Court made a decision about something called affirmative action that made it harder to help students of color get into college. A setback. Still, it's important to keep trying because over time we can help make real change. Like in this story, we're about to hear about Georgia Gilmore, who helped a really important justice movement in the 1960s be successful by lending her time, her energy, and, as it happens, her pies. So this book happens to have been donated by that same group of young people who went to Alabama. When Georgia Gilmore was a young girl, she lived on a farm in Alabama where she fed the pigs and milked the cows. Georgia did her best to listen to what her mother taught her. Think twice before doing anything you might regret, and never hate anyone. Georgia grew up and soon had a family of her own. She did plenty of cooking along the way, and when it was time for something sweet, she knew just what to do. She'd blend butter and sugar in a bowl to get her homemade pound cake started, and then add tea bags to a pot of water for a new batch of sweet tea. Georgia was a cook at the National Lunch Company in downtown Montgomery, Alabama, and because of segregation laws, the restaurant counter was separated into two sections, one for white customers, one for black customers. Georgia knew it was wrong, but that was the way things had always been. On December 1st, 1955, Georgia was working at the restaurant when a news alert came over the radio. A black woman named Rosa Parks had been arrested for refusing to give up her seat on a bus to a white passenger as the law demanded. Already a civil rights activist, Rosa was tired of giving in to rules that were unjust, and she wasn't the only one. The next day, an association of black women distributed a flyer asking people to boycott public transportation on Monday. It said, "Please stay off all buses." Georgia watched as buses drove down the street, one after another, empty, empty, empty. Not long after, she went to Holt Street Baptist Church to hear Reverend Ralph Abernathy and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. speak. The church was full. The crowd overflowed onto the street outside. Large speakers had been set up so thousands more could hear. Dr. King spoke about doing good things for one another. He talked about freedom, unity, equality. We are determined here in Montgomery to work and fight until justice runs down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Those were things Georgia believed in, and she was willing to fight for them. So Georgia decided to help the best way she knew how. She worked with a group of women in her community, and together they purchased the supplies they needed: bread, lettuce, and chickens. And then off they went to cook. The women brought food to the meetings that followed at church. They sold sandwiches. They sold dinners in their neighborhood. As the boycotters walked and walked, Georgia cooked and cooked. And boy, did the people of Montgomery love her food. Georgia's group donated their profits to help fund the boycott. But if anyone had found out these women were involved, they could have lost their jobs. So Georgia ran the operation, and the other women acted as secret helpers. You see, the way I figured it, people had to eat. So I made the pies, said Georgia. They sold them to stores, groceries, and beauty shops: sweet potato pie, peach pie, 7-Up cake. Only Georgia knew who baked them. Only Georgia knew who bought them. Every Monday and Thursday, Georgia would go early to boycott strategy meetings, walk up to the collection plate, and announce just how much her group was contributing. There was cheering and clapping and foot stomping. But when people asked where the money came from, she remembered her promise to keep it secret. It came from nowhere, she'd say. Because her brave group of women became known as the Club from Nowhere. But Montgomery didn't want their buses continuing to lose money, so the city did what it could to stop the protesters. Dr. King and 89 others were arrested for their roles, and Georgia was called to speak in court. Georgia knew she was doing the right thing by standing up for her fellow protesters, but news of the trial spread across the country, and when the National Lunch Company found out she was part of the boycott, she was fired from her job. Georgia was unemployed and raising 6 children on her own. She needed to find a way to support her family. Dr. King encouraged her to start her own business. All these years you worked for someone else. Now it's time you worked for yourself. He even helped her improve her kitchen. Word soon got round, and all kinds of people came to eat at Georgia's. So many, sometimes people ate standing up. They ordered food for delivery, too, hundreds of lunches every day. Fried chicken, black-eyed peas, fresh corn muffins, apple pie. Georgia was providing good food for her community, but also bringing the people of Montgomery together, black and white. On November 13th, 1956, Georgia was cooking while listening to music on the radio when the station interrupted the song to deliver the news. The Supreme Court had declared segregation on buses was illegal. The boycotters had won. Georgia was thrilled. All people could ride the bus and sit anywhere. They had won. Still, there would be more battles to fight. So Georgia Gilmore kept right on cooking. The end of that story. The beginning of our story. So how do we fight racism? Sometimes it's speaking out, sometimes maybe pulling nut grass, sometimes even making pies. Sometimes it's learning about nut grass, learning about people who make a difference by baking pies. Because the more we know, the more we're connected to justice efforts, the more we can feel connected to people who are part of them, the more we can feel connected to life itself. At least, that's how it works for me. I wonder what inspires you to work for justice. What leaves you feeling more alive and connected to other people? I will let you all, and all of us, ponder that question as we sing you out to your next fun thing. Go now in peace, let the love of God surround you.
During the month of August, our collection will be shared with Crossroads House. Crossroads House provides emergency and transitional shelter to families and individuals from southern Maine and New Hampshire. Founded in 1982, they provide unhoused people with basic necessities as well as the tools and guidance they need to return to permanent housing. Please give as you are able. I'll be gratefully received.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day.
Let us gather our hearts and minds as we take in these words adapted from colleagues known and unknown, opening ourselves to a higher awareness. Spirit of life and love, we gather here, each of us carrying our own stories, our own burdens, our own hopes. In this shared space, we open our hearts to the complexities of our lives and the world around us. We know that the struggles against racism and injustice are not just distant battles. They live with us and within us, shaping our communities, our relationships, and our sense of what is right and just. Help us to remember that the challenges we face, whether personal or collective, are deeply connected. The pain of exclusion, the weight of inequality, the longing for fairness and understanding. These are not just the struggles of some, but of all. May we find strength in acknowledging this truth and supporting one another through it. Grant us the courage to confront what is difficult, to see clearly the roots of injustice that persist, and to nurture the seeds of change in our own lives and actions. May we be present, listen deeply and with compassion, and know that in this shared journey, we can find healing and hope and cultivate transformation. May our hearts remain open, our hands ready to work for justice, and our spirits filled with the determination to create a world where love and equality and peace actually do prevail for all. As the music begins, I invite you to reflect on these words and on all that is in your heart and in your world. If you would like to light a candle during this time, please feel free to come forward and do so. Brian Stevenson, renowned civil rights lawyer, and the person who founded the museum that our young people visited in Alabama, also the author of the best-selling book Just Mercy. He calls on white people to, quote, get proximate, to get close to the issues of racism by engaging directly with the lives, stories, and perspectives of people of color. But getting proximate can mean more than just physical proximity. It's also about immersing ourselves in the experiences of others. The Beloved Conversations class that we took this spring has been an opportunity to do just that by reading the words, watching the videos, and reflecting on the lived realities of people of color. This deep engagement challenged those of us who took it to move beyond surface-level understanding and compelled us to have honest conversations about what we've learned and how it impacts our lives and our communities. In the following reflections, members of our community share their personal journeys through these conversations. Each story is a testament to the power of getting proximate, whether by confronting memories of past injustices, recognizing the hidden roots of racism in our own lives, or grappling with the complex emotions that rise from these truths. Through their words, we see how understanding and confronting racism is not just an external task, but an internal one as well, requiring courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to change.
Good morning. For those who don't know me, I'm Mel Blake. I've been coming to South Church for about 7 years. My wife, Rebecca, is far better known to most of you, or for many of you, than I am. You'll often see her with a ukulele, sitting in folk group and other musical activities. I prefer to sit in the back. But can I just parenthetically say how much we both love it here? It's my first time expressing that to you all. So why now for this topic? In my case, seeing racial hatred and oppression so overtly present in our society, just unbelievable things. Public strangulation of people of color by police. Mass shootings in churches and grocery stores to this day. Vigilantism, systematic disenfranchisement. They've all deeply affected me. I can't just stand by in the wings anymore. So, the Beloved Conversations program has given me and my fellow participants some tools and the inspiration to examine racism in a new light, with a focus on self-discovery and reflection. During the course, we were invited to look into, with a new appreciation, at our own white ethnicity, traditions, and genealogy. Where did we come from? What do we hold dear? In my case, with some dread, I must say, I chose to examine my father's family from the Deep South. One of my great-great-grandfathers lived in New Orleans. He was a well-known journalist and a member of the Democratic Party, which after the Civil War meant being largely in opposition to the North and to the party of Lincoln. But he also helped form and was the public face of a group called the Crescent City White League, which was a paramilitary group that helped foment a bloody revolt and takeover by ex-Confederate soldiers of Louisiana's duly elected government in 1874. President Grant sent troops to restore order, But this and other related events foreshadowed the terrible Jim Crow era that followed. So what to make of all of that? The evidence was clear. I wish I could talk to my deceased father in particular from the Deep South about it. Did he or his parents know? And if so, why was this fact and other important, albeit painful stories about our family not passed on? I know he struggled to make sense of segregation, which he abhorred. At about the same age as I am now, my dad began writing about his boyhood in Mississippi, where they moved, and the questions he had posed to his parents about why his black neighbors were so badly treated. The answer he got was very unsatisfactory. Went something like this: "Unfortunately, son, that's the way of the world, and we have to do the best we can despite racial inequality." My dad ultimately joined the Army and then the U.S. Foreign Service after World War II, and he left the South for good. I have to say, I wasn't shocked to learn all of this, yet it makes the truth of those times more vivid, knowing that my direct ancestors played a role. I'm committed to changing the narrative of that. At a minimum, my children will not be kept in the dark. And it helps me orient myself on my continuing journey. I'm trying to adopt more of a beginner's mind. Hard for me, as my default mode is to become an expert at anything that I take on. But for now, I'm letting my feelings of remorse, sadness, and anger just wash over me. Lastly, let me say that while the Beloved Conversations program has tackled difficult truths, it's also enveloped in us love and understanding, inspiration and hope. We live in the present, so let's embrace it and make it better. My fellow travelers and I invite you to join us. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm B.J. Lates, and I'm here to share one of my stories about our family. I am a mom for 3 adult children, all in their 50s. The oldest child is our biological daughter. Our 2 younger children, 2 sons, are adopted and of multiracial ancestry. Counting them and their spouses and their children, our family now consists of 8 Caucasians, 5 with a Black heritage, and 2 Southeast Asians. A year ago, when our Cambodian foster son joined us for a family reunion with his 2 adult children and 2 of their friends, our granddaughter of Laotian and Black heritage counted up those present and declared that for once the Asians had won. What joy to see them all together, catching up and remembering earlier times amidst laughter, lots of laughter. While I share this joyful picture, I need to also share a tiny piece of the reality of raising children of color in our culture. Living in the small town of Hollis, New Hampshire, our children were raised in an all-white protective environment in the mid-70s until they left home during the 80s and 90s. This is the town where Dick and I were raised, and we returned when our jobs called us back from Vermont. Our children were known and cared for by tons of relatives and neighbors who knew us and our family. A few issues arose as our sons grew up, including dating in one case. But overall, lifelong friendships were formed by our kids and their friends. Fast forward to adulthood, and when one son and his family moved into the apartment which was attached to our house, He and his wife worked in Merrimack and Nashua, and our 2 grandsons attended the same Hollis schools that our children had attended before them. In the summer, we all enjoyed my family's camp on a small pond in town called Rocky Pond. Our son continued the tradition of going to Rocky Pond at the end of the workday with his family to relax and enjoy the water until a police officer began following him when he drove through town to reach the pond. He was ultimately stopped and questioned. "Where are you headed?" he was asked. Our son explained that he was going to Rocky Pond, naming his cousins who owned it, all of whom were white. The officer began following him every day throughout the town. Finally, our son was at the end of his rope and talked to us about these worrisome events. Dick made an appointment to speak to the chief of police, who knew our family well, to discuss this curious behavior. "Why is this happening?" he asked. The chief thought for a bit and then said, "Oh, we have a new officer, and I'm sure he doesn't know that your son grew up here. I'll speak to him." Our son, a person of color, raised in town, known by the townspeople, could not change the color of his skin, nor did he want to. But driving while black is still alive and kicking, even in the small, safe town of Hollis, New Hampshire. Thank goodness I'm not telling you a more frightening story about living in our current environment. But I can share with you that these microaggressions wear on a person's soul and cause a kind of exhaustion that is not experienced by us or our Caucasian friends. As parents, we have always had our close friends and relatives to talk to about our experiences while we were raising our children. But there was no forum or organized way to share our experiences and learnings. For me, the Blessed Conversations course allowed me to reflect on some of these happenings in a new way. I have learned the value of opening up and sharing some of our family stories as I dig deeper into my own understanding of racism and how to move from uncomfortable desperation to the possibility of change and joy within our world. I see that this will not happen without a whole village opening up, listening to the stories, thinking about the issues, and figuring out how to ask, what if? What if we can share our thinking, our learnings, our fears, our dreams? I believe that this open sharing will bring us to a new place, a place open to change, to growth, and to freedom and joy for all our citizens. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Dick Lates, and one of my favorite stories about one of our adopted black sons happened when he was about 4. We had 3 carpenters that were working daily at our house, and one of them was a very blond young man known as Whitey. He was our son's buddy, and our son followed him everywhere, all day, trying to help. One day, my sister-in-law had taken our son to Nashua with her while she did some shopping. The 2 of them were waiting in the checkout line of a supermarket when our son spied his buddy entering the store. He immediately yelled out, "Hey, Whitey!" The woman behind them in the checkout line was horrified. And she showed her disapproval and her scorn at this outburst. Then she said, "This is so inappropriate for you to allow your son to call that young man Whitey." My sister-in-law, who's never without a comeback, turned to her and said, "Lady, that's the man's name." BJ and I have now become aware of our naivete about racism back in the 70s and 80s, and about the effects of the dual culture phenomenon that is faced by black youth who are raised by white parents. In our beloved conversations experience, I've thought back to the stark cultural duality of adoptions like ours, and I understand better now the constant confusion and stress that this places on an adopted black child of white parents. One foot in the white world and the other in the black world. Of course, all blacks experience the duality of living in both worlds and the stress and the exhaustion that it causes. But a black youth having white parents brings the white culture much closer. Added to this stress and this confusion are the feelings of loss and abandonment that all adopted children must feel to some degree when they're made aware that they are adopted. But to our boys, their skin color made their adoption status pretty obvious from the start. We raised our boys in a small suburban town in New Hampshire, as BJ said, which seemed to us like a safe and secure environment for them. So we never bothered to have the talk. We had little fear of police interactions and fear for the kids' safety until I found the need to have that chat with the police chief that BJ just mentioned. It wasn't until one son was enrolled at Northeastern and developed some close friendships with black students there that he was confronted with, "How come you talk white?" I know he was bothered by that question. This particular son is very sensitive about race issues, and as a young adult working in Boston, he told us about a couple of times when he sensed a white woman's discomfort with his presence. Like one time at night when he found himself alone with a white woman in a subway car. He told us that he could sense her fear of him, and he felt bad that he made her fearful. He also told us about one time he was walking behind a white woman in a parking garage on his way to his car. He was careful to walk very slowly so she wouldn't be afraid that he was getting closer. For our sons, this is not a one-time consciousness of white fear. It's a constant reminder of their race. Most of what we've learned about the challenges of racism, we've learned from our sons. Theirs has been a unique black experience in the sense that they've grown up in dual cultures, white and black, in a white home environment. My participation in beloved conversations has helped me to understand the constant weight that discrimination places on a black person, and it's helped me to empathize with that experience. I'm very proud of our family and of our lives together. Our kids have been a priceless gift to us, teaching us how to become a loving, trusting, and respectful interracial family unit. Beloved Conversations has helped me to examine my memories of our life as a family and to engage in meaningful conversations in our learning pod about white supremacy culture and the roots of racism in this country. I believe that we whites must find new ways to engage ourselves in the extremely difficult conversations about racism if we ever want to achieve racial justice in America. Thank you.
What if? What if more white people took the time to explore the roots of racism in this country? What if we, as a whole village, opened up, listening to the stories, thinking about the issues, and figuring out how to ask, what if? What if we can share our thinking, our learnings, our fears, and our dreams, and that this could bring us to a new place, open to change and growth and more freedom and justice for everyone? Let us join together in singing our closing hymn, Building a New Way. Please rise. We'll sing verses 1, 2, and 4. Please rise in body or in spirit.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, this world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
After our closing words and after our postlude, I invite you to greet your neighbor. And if you feel so bold, tell them something you hope stays with you from this service, or answer that question I asked at the beginning, if you remember it, was about a story or a poem, a film or a book that you read about race or racism or of a people of color that particularly touched you. As we leave this sacred space, let us carry with us a commitment to build a new way. May our actions reflect our deepest values and our hearts be open to the work ahead. Together, let us strive for a world where peace and freedom are not just dreams, but realities for everyone. Go in peace. May love guide your steps.